Well, hello there. So in this video, we're going to do some practice related to equilibrium. So for this first parts, right, we're just going to kind of draw and label a new AD and then draw a new SRAS kind of showing the long run adjustment. So on a test, it'd be unlikely you'd have to draw both of these on the same one, but we're kind of thinking about what would happen in the short run and then what would happen in the long run as the economy self-corrects, right? So short run, it says government significantly increases defense spending. So in the short run, we would say government spending goes up, and so we'd say G here, and so aggregate demand is going to increase, right? So we'll start with just here, AD, and we'll say 2, AD2. Now, what happened to prices? Well, they went up, and output went up, right? And so we went from point A to point B. Now, when the price levels went up, right, that caused resource costs to go up. Resource costs. In the long run, resources would become more expensive, and it's because of this right here, right, this part. So resource costs go up, therefore aggregate supply is going to decrease. And so when it decreases, it's shifting to the left, and so we'd end up with SRAS 3, right? So we go from point A to point B to point C. So what's the long run effect on price levels? Well, they went up. And you can see that basically you went up and then you went right back down again with output. So, and we'd say no change in output, right? Now, let's take a look at what the second one would be. Consumers fear a recession. Well, that's going to affect their consumption spending, and that would go down. So shift aggregate demand to the left. And so what happens to prices? Well, prices fall. And when those prices fall, in the long run, right, as the economy has time to adjust, you'll see that phrase a lot, the resource prices or the resource costs, or we can call them input costs, the input costs will go down. And so therefore aggregate supply will increase. So SRAS eventually kind of goes to 3. So we go from point A to point B, and then we go to point C. And we can see here, prices fell even more, and initially output fell, but then it went right back to where we started again. So for this, the long run effect would be a decrease with, again, no change in Y. Assuming, right, that we didn't do anything to make any effect here, it's just this isn't what happens in the long run as the economy kind of fixes itself, right? Now, the second part of today is what happens if the economy, if we don't have it fix itself. And this is going to be kind of an interesting way of thinking about this. Let's start the economy in a recession, right? Let's say GDP R, price levels, and the economy we're going to start is in a recession. So the output level is too low, right? We have YF and we have Y1. Make sure we label all the curves, right? That's really important. And so the output's too low. We have Y1, we want to be at YF. How could we do that? Well, the government could cut taxes. If they cut taxes, we'd say consumption spending would rise and aggregate demand would rise. And so we could just push that aggregate demand right back up. Now, if we wanted to, right, we just push it right back up to where it used to be. If the problem was that we started with the recession and maybe it was because aggregate demand went down, well, this just fixes that, right? We go right back to where we started. If we started at point A and we went to point B, well, then we go right back to point A again and everything's hunky-dory. That's the idea here of, you can let the economy correct itself, right? You can do that, or you could use policies to change this, right? And that's an example of it, is why maybe during a recession, government would cut taxes. Or another way of saying that, right, aside from decrease taxes, would be increase transfers, right? Because that does the same thing. And gee, what do you think? What did the government do during this pandemic? They have handed out cash, right? I've gotten checks from Uncle Sam. That's the exact idea here. Then I'm supposed to go spend it. Consumption spending rises, and it pushes aggregate demand right back up. Now, imagine, though, if we're in the opposite. We have the opposite problem. We have too much output, right? Too much output. Boy, what a terrible problem to have. If only, right? So if we had aggregate demand and aggregate supply, and so we're way out here. We got way too much output. Well, a way we could reduce output, we just raise taxes. If we do that, that'll reduce consumption and reduce aggregate demand. So that pushes the aggregate demand right back. Kind of thinking about, we go from point A to point B, and it pushes us right back to point A again. So, we go from Y1 to YF. Okay, so that's kind of a good little entree into the next topic a little bit. But now we know how we can correct gaps, right? You could either wait around and the shortened aggregate supply will shift back because of resource costs changing, or you can intervene, and that's going to be our next topic. All right, hopefully this helped you. See you next time.